In today's alternate history, the United States and Soviet Union, the two giants of the Second World War, will fight. For such a giant shift to be plausible, we need to go all the way back to 1867, when Alaska was sold to the United States by Russia. Alaska was actually offered to the Americans all the way back in 1857. They, however, refused because they were too busy dealing with the American Civil War. In our alternate history, for whatever reason, the deal is never offered again. This $7.2 million check used to buy Alaska never exists. If we fast forward to the 1930s, we will find Russia has been transformed into the Soviet Union. The United States is deeply uncomfortable with an expansionist communist power on their continent. Back in 1857, it was actually the Russians who offered to sell Alaska to the United States. This time, it will be the United States who will ask the Soviet Union to buy Alaska. The Soviets, however, are no longer interested. Alaska had proven to be a useful military staging ground for their navy back in their war with the Japanese. Starting from the mid-1930s, the US government is just waiting for an opportunity, any excuse, to take Alaska. They saw how the Japanese were able to wage a successful limited war against the Russians a few years earlier. They hope to do the same in Alaska. They do not think the Soviet Union will be willing to sacrifice much just for such an empty piece of land. This assumption will prove to be wrong. The Soviet Union under Stalin is a completely different animal now. This course of action may initially seem implausible, given the American anti-war attitude after World War I. This, however, does not take into account that the American public was always willing to support wars for clear national self-interest, wars of expansion. It's only wars to defend foreign peoples in foreign lands the American public hated. In 1939, the Americans would get their chance when the Soviet Union invaded Poland along with Germany. This provided the perfect excuse to invade Alaska. In the spring of 1940, the American offensive through Canada into Alaska begins. The Canadians and British heavily protest military movements through their territory and don't want Canada involved in any Soviet-American fight. This protest, however, is completely ignored. The Canadians and British are way too distracted with Nazi Germany to do anything to stop the Americans, and so they are allowed to pass unimpeded. The Americans expect quick progress, since they do not think the Soviets will have invested many resources in defending Alaska. This turns out not to be the case. The American military in 1940 is not a powerful force. The harsh terrain in Alaska and the poor roads leading to Alaska from the mainland United States hamper progress. The Soviet military is also far stronger and more experienced than the Americans expected. The Soviets are able to easily keep up with the American advance. Progress is very slow, only a few kilometers every week. The main mistake for the Americans was they overestimated the difficulty for the Soviet Union in sending troops and supplies to Alaska, and they underestimated the difficulty for them of sending troops and supplies from the mainland United States through Canada to Alaska. The US Navy in 1940 is not yet powerful enough to completely sever the flow of supplies across the Bering Strait. The massive speed at which the Soviet Union and Germany crushed Poland also allows the Soviet Union to transfer troops to the east much faster than the US expected. At this rate, this is going to be an embarrassing defeat for the Americans. Towards the end of 1940, American progress improves, but it is still slow. The winter is coming around, which will make further progress almost impossible. At this time, on the European front, the Battle of Britain is being fought, and the British are still holding out hope that they can get the United States to join the war on their side. The chances, however, that the United States will join a war against someone who could help them against the Soviets, is very slim. The Battle of Britain is not going well for the Nazis. it's very difficult for them to gain air superiority over England. Whenever a German pilot is shot down over Britain, for example, he is captured or killed and cannot return to the fight. British pilots who are shot down in the defense of their island, however, are often rescued and are put back into another fighter the next day. Planning for Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union has already begun. However, the execution of the plan is delayed indefinitely. Hitler wants the United States to wear down the Soviets as much as possible before he makes any moves. He also knows he's going to need much more commitment from the Luftwaffe over England in order to gain a victory. One important thing to note in this timeline is that the United States is at a higher level of military development earlier on. This is simply because they joined the war earlier and had a longer time to spool up their industrial production. The Soviets too are at a higher level of industrial output earlier on due to the war in the East. Fast forward to 1941 and the World War begins in earnest. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor just as they do in our timeline. They're even more likely to do this in this scenario because they think the United States is distracted and will not be able to fight a war with two adversaries simultaneously. On the Alaskan front, American troops, now more experienced and with more established supply lines, are starting to do better. However, there's an increasing flow of material from the Soviet Union that's keeping pace with any progress they make. Perhaps the largest difference in this alternate timeline from ours is that the Germans do not launch Operation Barbarossa in June. They focus all their resources on the Luftwaffe and want to knock out Britain before they do anything else. It also goes without saying that Lend-Lease for the Soviets is not happening in this timeline. At this point, nobody seems to be winning. The United States and Soviet Union are in a deadlock in Alaska. The Luftwaffe cannot break the British resistance over England, but the English cannot hope to launch a D-Day style invasion of Europe either. At this point, all sides are just waiting for the other to run out of steam. This is now a war of attrition. The American government, however, knows that they cannot afford a very, very long war, purely due to public opinion. They begin thinking, how is it that they can break the Soviet resistance more effectively? If you're interested in a part 2, please like, comment, and subscribe. That will let me know that people are interested, and I'll get to making a second part straight away. Thanks for watching.